Shanghai is currently the center of the AI universe, hosting the 2026 World AI Conference and the high-level meeting on global AI governance. And this isn't just another tech expo. China's President Xi Jinping opened the event with a keynote address yesterday morning, outlining China's ideas for the future of global AI and announcing 5,000 AI training opportunities for developing countries over the next 5 years. He also mentioned the importance of keeping AI in human control a handful of times. So what does it all mean? Well, today I'll ask my special guest, Professor Warwick Powell. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. The 2026 World AI Conference opened here in Shanghai yesterday, promising lots of new technologies and innovations over the coming days. For the first time, the exhibition area has cleared 100,000 square meters, with over 1,100 exhibitors showcasing 3,000 products, 300 of which are global debuts. President Xi Jinping opened the event with a keynote address that laid out a clear alternative to the current status quo, calling for a just and equitable system for global AI governance. While some Western outlets are already framing this as a direct challenge to US dominance, President Xi's speech focused on 4 key pillars: openness and win-win innovation, security and controllability, inclusiveness between civilizations, and global solidarity. Notably, he pitched China as a champion for the Global South, warning against a new historical injustice where developing nations are left behind. To back that up, he announced that China will provide 5,000 AI training opportunities for developing countries over the next 5 years, and highlighted the launch of the World AI Cooperation Organization right here in Shanghai. Of course, AI is a massive tool with huge implications for how each and every one of us will live and work into the future. So to help us break it down, I welcome my special guest today, Professor Warwick Powell from the Queensland University of Technology. Professor, welcome back to the show. First up, President Xi noted we should adhere to the principles of openness and win-win and boost innovation-driven development, encourage open source, openness, collaboration, and sharing. So how do you interpret this emphasis on openness and collaboration in AI development in a practical sense? And what challenges do you see in turning this into a reality globally?
It's good to be with you again, Andy. And as you implied, the speech yesterday by President Xi Jinping is actually a very important intervention in, I guess, actually still a very early days of a new technological frontier. The kind of AIs that we have in our mind today is, of course, something that has only been within reach of most people in the world for the last 3 or 4 years. Where I think President Xi Jinping is trying to get to and open up an important point of consideration around the world is that at the end of the day, technologies like this, which has incredible reach and incredible potential, need to be addressed and dealt with and harnessed on the basis that we're all in this together. There's no point, and in fact, there's a lot of danger when particular interest groups or nations seek to hold technologies close to their chest in a way that aims to use these technologies to their own narrow interests at the disadvantage of others. So the emphasis on openness is really about saying, look, this is a very challenging time, but it's also an incredibly exciting opportunity for humanity at large. And if we are to make the most of it and at the same time ensure that its downside risks don't get the better of us, we have to actually realize that we're in this together. And the only way we can do that is to emphasize an ethos of openness. Insofar as challenges are concerned, of course, there is always a temptation, particularly when technologies are integrated into institutions and systems of profit-making and stock valuations and power, of course, that some actors in the world may seek to withhold important technologies from the world at large and exploit their unique positions to lord it over everyone else. I certainly hope that that's not the case, and I think that President Xi's remarks lays out a strategic orientation that mitigates against that.
And there were quite a few mentions in the speech about the dangers of AI getting out of control and how imperative it is that we, as human beings, remain in the driver's seat. Now, we've all seen those Hollywood movies where AI takes over. One of my favorites is 2001: A Space Odyssey. But obviously, this has been a fear for quite some time. But to hear those words from President Xi Jinping really takes it to another level for me anyway. Do you really think there's a chance that AI could take over, for want of a better term?
I think the real issue is probably still not so much a question of AI singularity and those sorts of things, which is the stuff of the fantasies and the science fiction. It's probably a little bit more grounded in the idea that it is easy when you have technologies like this that appear to be able to emulate human capability, but to do so at a much higher level of efficiency and speed and power, that we allow these technologies to fill voids and take over things that, in fact, human beings need to remain responsible for. And these are things such as being able to make grounded judgments about what it is that we believe is a good thing or a bad thing and ought to do or a not ought to do. These sorts of judgment calls, which require an attunement to context, to history, and relationships with others, is actually not something that LLMs, large language models, and their ilk are well positioned to handle. So that's the first thing. The second thing, though, I think, is that President Xi Jinping brings a distinctly Chinese sensibility to this question of the relationship between human beings and technology. And this is not so much about uh, seeking or having a quest to create a technology that can uh, become a god, but it's to create tools that enable humans to lead better and more effective lives, to enable people to flourish, but also to do so in a manner that is, dare I say, within the flow of nature. Right? So it's not about uh, building technologies that allow us to dominate the world. It's about building technologies and harnessing them to allow us to better align with the world and align with the forces of nature and the cosmos at large. That's a Taoist question in many regards. And I think deep inside the outlook articulated by President Xi, there is a strong Chinese imprint in terms of this kind of sensibility.
Now, I just want to bring up another quote from the speech that I found quite striking. President Xi said, in the course of history, the invention of the steam engine heralded the industrial civilization. The widespread access to electricity brightened up modern society, and the birth of the internet brought the entire world together. Each of these technological revolutions has profoundly reshaped our way of work and life. So, how significant do you think it is that President Xi placed AI in the same historical lineage as the steam engine, electricity, and the internet?
I think it's very significant because it's often tempting to downplay the potential impact of technologies, but at the same time, it's also tempting to overplay the impact of technologies. And where I think President Xi is bringing the conversation to is a recognition that the potential of this technology is both qualitatively and quantitatively wide ranging. But for these potentialities to actually play a constructive and useful role, it's important that human beings remain in the driver's seat. The recognition that technologies like this can fundamentally transform the ways in which we interact with each other, whether it's in a work setting or in a leisure setting, and how we interact with the rest of the world, with nature and things like that, I think is incredibly insightful because it is something that can potentially empower people to lead much better lives around the world. But like most things, there is a dialectic, if you will, or a sense that where there is good, there is also potential bad. Where there is opportunity, there is potential risk. And the critical question is how we can bring a responsible disposition towards this mixture of possibilities to ensure that the best is actually brought out from them and that the technology itself brings out the best of us as human beings.
Lastly today, Professor, Xi mentioned those AI training spots for 5,000 people from developing nations, especially the Global South. How do you see this initiative helping developing countries over the coming years?
It's a very important announcement because it contrasts, I think, quite distinctly with the broad approach that we see from the other global leader in artificial intelligence, namely the American big technology sector and the American administration that's obviously very much behind it. Not that long ago, perhaps it was 18 months or so ago, Vice President Vance delivered a speech in Europe where he spoke quite clearly about America's vision for artificial intelligence. And that was, of course, a vision that saw American artificial intelligence dominate the world and dictate the terms of engagement. By way of contrast, President Xi's remarks and the announcement of these practical measures is an extension of a broader perspective. It's the perspective, as I mentioned earlier, that we are in this together. The lesson of history is that if these kinds of technologies are harnessed and withheld by a small number of individuals, corporations, or countries at the expense of others, then it's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for conflict, whereas we need to be thinking about how we harness and mobilize these technologies as technologies and tools for empowerment and collaborative benefit. The announcement of these training and capacity building resources, if you will, is, I think, part and parcel of China's own sense of its role in the world, and that is as a great enabling power.
Professor Warwick Powell, as always, so much to think about. Thank you for your time today.
A pleasure.
And on that note, that will be all for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What was the most interesting point for you in President Xi's speech? And do you think greater international cooperation on AI governance is possible? Do let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.